The Niners got pushed around today in Vegas. That's the report we're getting. And the Raiders in a joint practice maybe had the better of the 49ers. Doesn't even matter. What are you looking for in terms of this weekend and the actual game? Well, not an actual real game, but an actual preseason game on Sunday in Vegas. One more joint practice to go between now and then. But, Allen, the word is none of the quarterbacks looked very good today.
Yeah, they didn't look very good. Jimmy Garoppolo, who we talked about the article, we'll get into that a little bit later. Jimmy Garoppolo did look pretty darn good. And I would just call it jitters. I wouldn't necessarily know why Brock Purdy would have jitters, but at the same time, I mean, let's talk about it. Brock Purdy, limited amount of games. He played very well, but he still feels like he has something to prove. Obviously, Trey Lance does. And even though Sam Darnold has the most experience, there's a reason Sam Darnold is here, right? When Sam Darnold was drafted, he didn't think he'd be on his third team at this stage in his career. So all these guys have something to prove, and they know, as we talked about in the crossover about Kyle Shanahan, whether he's a player's coach or not, they know that he has a very high standard. That's what we do know. Player's coach or non-player's coach, he has a high standard. And if you're not meeting that standard, he will find somebody else that will. So I think there was maybe a little bit of jitters going on. We know Brock Purdy's not going to play during the first preseason game, so it's an opportunity for Trey Lance. And there's another article that we'll get into later as well, talking about what about the Bucs looking for Trey Lance. Yeah. I mean, they're a mess. They got weapons. Teams that have time, right? Even the team that they're playing, which what a wonderful world that would be, or what a wacky world that would be, right, if Trey Lance ended up backing up Jimmy Garoppolo. So there's a lot on the line. I think that Trey Lance, you talk about my stock all the time, Dibs, and I appreciate you because in this industry, you need people to ride for you, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I really do.
I got my bike helmet on. I ride for Allen
I hear you. Trey Lance, it feels like, even though he didn't have the best day, it feels like, I don't know if his stock is rising, but it feels like some of the conversations that I've had, or even last week about the whole cut thing, it feels like Trey Lance's stock isn't as low as maybe some of us may have thought. And I don't know who else is on that boat. All I know is based on what I saw and what I read, it felt like Trey Lance's stock is very low. And now that these reports are coming out, maybe it's not as low as people think, which is good for the Niners, whether you want to move off of Trey or not.
Right. If you want to keep him, then the fact that Trey Lance's stock is higher than it would have been a month ago is good, because Trey Lance can be a helpful piece if you need a quarterback, if Brock Purdy can't go, or if you want to mix it up and go to Trey Lance, or whatever the decision is.
Yeah.
Having Trey Lance play well, it doesn't hurt you. But the other side of it is, and we'll get into the actual trade proposal here in 15 minutes on what the theory is, or the hypothetical that was thrown out in terms of Tampa Bay and Trey Lance. If Trey Lance's stock goes up between now and whenever he gets possibly dealt, that can only help them as well. And, this Sunday we know that Brock Purdy will not play. Brock Purdy will play tomorrow in joint practices, and then Saturday's an off day. Sunday he won't play. So Trey Lance and Sam Darnold and I guess Brandon Allen, for whatever he can do, right, they're all going to get a shot to show what they can do in this offense.
You know what's interesting, Dibs, is let's say Trey Lance does ball out, right? Let's say Brock Purdy doesn't play. Trey Lance, because even last year, he had the one to Danny Gray against Green Bay. Even last year, he did some things. Let's say Trey Lance balls out for the whole preseason. Is there something to this where it's a lot, as much as Kyle Shanahan has said, Brock's the real deal, right? You still did draft Trey Lance. Are we underselling how much the Niners would be willing to move off of Trey? I mean, Brock's only played a handful of games, and we believe in Brock, and we do think he's the real deal, but I don't know what the Niners are. I'm not ready to call Brock the franchise QB for the next 5-10 years. If Trey Lance starts balling out, it's not that he's going to beat out Brock, but would the Niners still be, all right, well, maybe, are we about to trade away the unicorn that we thought we were going to have after we helped to mold him into what he is now? Now we're going to let him be free somewhere else? I don't know, because you don't know enough about. Now, if it ends, Brock Purdy has a great season. Let's say they win the Super Bowl, right? Sure. Then hey, Brock's our guy. Trey, thank you, and everybody wins. If they don't win the Super Bowl and Brock plays pretty well, let's say he doesn't get injured, let's say they lose to whoever, right before the Super Bowl again, or maybe even before that, then you have a situation where, hey, Last time we saw Trey, other teams, knock, knock, knock. Last time we saw Trey, he looked pretty good. What's that price tag looking like?
Yeah, it goes up.
It goes up, but would the Niners still be willing to move? If Brock Purdy looks like a slightly better version of Jimmy Garoppolo, and the last time they saw Trey Lance, he's starting to look more and more electric each and every day, would the Niners still be willing to move him? They would probably want to move him for a price that, even though his stock is up, would still be probably a little too steep, right? If I'm Tampa Bay, hey, I mean, we like Trey, but come on. And then it gets into, do the Niners really want to move him? So the drama, it never ends with the Niners.
It never ends, but I do think that they would get to that point where they would have to move him because you've got Trey Lance right now in year 3, which means at the end of year 3, you have to decide if you want to pick up his 5th-year option or not.
Great point. Yeah.
At the end of year 3, if he still is your backup, and Brock Purdy, in your scenario, Brock Purdy played well enough to get you to the NFC Championship game again. He stayed healthy, and
he didn't have it.
He didn't have it. You didn't have it as a team. But Brock Purdy played well, and he stayed healthy, and you didn't pull him out because he wasn't good enough. Well, at that point, you're keeping Brock Purdy, and you're getting off of Trey Lance because you're not going to give both of them a second contract.
Yeah, it's a good point. I guess it also depends on how things look, right? I mean, when you say about Jimmy, people would think if you said it about Jimmy without seeing the actual games, people would say the same thing. Why would anybody want to move off of Jimmy? Look at his resume.
Right.
We have to see the gameplay. If Brock Purdy looks a bit limited, the arm strength, whatever it is, and the Niners with that ridiculous roster still won games, it doesn't necessarily mean, and thank you for that, it doesn't necessarily matter how far they go. It just matters how Brock Purdy looks.
Exactly, how he looks and how they feel about Trey Lance, because Trey Lance is going to be owed a lot more money next year, and then into year 5, if you pick up his 5th-year option, and there's a certain luxury in having a quarterback that you're paying less than $1 million, and that's where you are right now with Brock Purdy. 888-957-9570. What did you make of day 1 of Niner joint practices? Dennis is in San Francisco, and he wants to weigh in. What's going on, Dennis? You're on 95.7 The Game.
What's up, guys?
How are you, Dennis?
I'm pretty good today. How are you guys doing?
Wonderful. I'm already kind of missing Alan Stiles when he leaves me after Friday, but I do have a week off coming. So what's up, Dennis?
Well, I won't miss him.
Whoa.
Because
I'm about to run you right now, Dennis.
I'm joking.
Nobody comes down the road of my partner.
Let's hear it.
I'm about to run this guy, Alan. That's it.
Here's the deal. What would Jerry Rice's career would have looked like with a mediocre quarterback? Like Rice's career, he had Montana and Young back-to-back. This is the case in point of Kelce. Kelce has Reed and Mahomes. The problem that, if you want to compare Kittle and Kelce, I mean, I think there's no comparison. There's the best tight end in football is George Kittle. I'm not just saying that because I'm a 49er fan. I'm saying it because it's a fact. Part of the tight end position is blocking. I played football. And the other is receiving. So Kittle he's got his coach didn't throw to him. I don't know what was wrong with Shanahan that he wasn't throwing to Kittle. But finally we get Brock Purdy out there, and they're throwing to Kittle. Look what Kittle did when Purdy came in. He was setting on fire. Kittle's the best tight end I've seen, and I think he's better than Russ Francis. All those guys.
Man,
Kelce's got Mahomes and Reed. They throw him the ball. He's good. I know he's good, but he doesn't compare to Kittle at all.
There's just
Thanks,
Dennis, thank you so much. There's
Dennis,
just no
be
way
careful
you can
coming down the road.
There's
of my
no way
partner.
you can have a take like that and say it's not because I'm a Niner fan. It is because you're a Niner fan. Let's just be honest, and that's fine. That's fine. You miss me when you say it's not close. If you want to take George Kittle, cool, go ahead. But saying it's not close destroys all your credibility. It just destroys all your credibility. You cannot say it's not close. And I'll give you this much. Tell me this, Dibs. Who would say that George Kittle is better than Travis Kelce that is not a Niner fan? Who would say that? Is there anybody?
And again, this goes to a bigger question about who are we asking? Because in terms of fantasy football, and that's what most people see, a lot of people don't see what George Kittle does in terms of the run game.
But that's fine.
But that's not. So you're asking people who have no clue. You're asking people who are looking at stats.
Mm-hmm.
And Travis Kelce's stats are always going to be better than George Kittle's. But George Kittle plays winning football at the tight end position. He's a blocker. He's a sixth lineman who happens to also be good at catching the football.
But and to your point, this is why the whole comparison thing, it doesn't matter. Because if we want to do this, let's put Kittle on the Chiefs. Let's put Tom Brady on the Raiders. Let's do all this stuff, and it messes up everything. So I get that, but to me, just saying it's not close. Come on, what are we talking about here? What really not close? Come on now.
No, it's more than close, but I would say that in terms of the modern game and what each player means to his offense, Travis Kelce's better than George Kittle. In terms of what Kelce means to Kansas City, it's more important than what George Kittle means to the 49ers. If George Kittle goes out and you have to replace him, the Niners offense takes less of a step back than Kansas City's does if they lose Travis Kelce.
Sure.
And that to me is like, it's VORP in baseball, value over replacement player.
Yeah.
And when you look at, like, if George Kittle goes out and he's got this adductor strain, well, you've got tight ends who can come in and block as well, not as well as he can, but close to as well as he can. And you've got McCaffrey and Debo and Ayuk, and you can even put Juszczyk out there in the tight end spot, and he plays tight end at times. And you can still do things without George Kittle.
And you led me right where I was going, Dibs.
That's what I do.
The best ability is availability.
Talk to
all right?
me.
And Travis Kelce's been doing this for a long time. And you know one thing about Travis Kelce? He's always on the field. You cannot say that about George Kittle. And we've said it before on this show, and I'll say it again. I'm not saying he's a master of none, but George Kittle might be seen as more of a jack of all trades, and he's very good at a lot of different things. We know what Travis Kelce does, and he does it at an elite level, and he's been doing it. George Kittle comes and goes, right? Because of injury, because of things like that. Again, the comparison, it's not fair. It's apples and oranges. I get all that. Thank you, Dibs. But at the same time, saying that it's not close just destroys all credibility. I'm sorry.
Kelce, games played from his second year on, 16, 16, 16, 15, 16, 16, 15, 16, 17.
Yeah.
So he's missed he's missed 4 games total in his last 9 years.
In football.
Is it tackle football?
In football.
You got to say tackle football.
Tackle football.
Man.
Not flag football.
No. Yeah, Kelce's been more than durable. 144 games. He's got 814 catches. And I do think that the all-time tight end records will be in some jeopardy. I mean, he's got the best quarterback in football, and he's got a head coach who loves to design creative offensive plays. He's a monster in the red zone. He's scored 69 touchdowns. He'll probably eclipse Gronk in that category. He'll surpass Tony Gonzalez.
Right.
He might go down as the best tight end of all time.
And look, I'm not saying it doesn't get said, but I rarely hear people talk about Gronk's blocking. I'm not saying he wasn't a good blocker, but I'm saying it's this crutch that Niner fans hold with George Kittle. Well, his blocking. So he's a better blocker.
It's not a crutch, and I resent the fact that you're calling it a crutch.
But it is, though.
It's a skill, is what it is.
No, I know, but that's the one thing that they hold, and that's the one thing that they have against Travis Kelce. But to your point, what if it just doesn't matter? Fine, you can give him blocking, and I would still take Travis Kelce.
Agreed. But
that's all I'm saying.
Don't discount the blocking in terms of.
I'm not.
Yeah, in terms of what this offense does, and Mark doesn't like when I get into personnel groupings, but Kyle Shanahan runs 21 personnel, more than almost any other team in football, 2 running backs and 1 tight end. And that's an interesting distinction because the 1 tight end is a guy who's a monster blocker. So you go fullback and tight end. Your fullback is great as a lead blocker, and your tight end is elite as a blocker and a pass catcher. So you're able to go 21 personnel. Kansas City runs a lot of 11, 1 running back, 1 tight end, and they don't do as much power running or the zone game where it's going to be Kittle and Juszczyk both blocking in the run game. So to me, they're 2 totally different players, and a comparison is like comparing a a left guard to a right tackle in terms of offensive line. It just doesn't really add up to me.
You said it best. If Travis Kelce was on the Niners, he wouldn't be as good. And if George Kittle was on the Chiefs, he wouldn't be as good.
Exactly.
But there are always going to people, and someone's typing it right now on the YouTube chat or Xfinity Bowl. But if he had Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, you know what? I guess we'll never know.
Right. And he's got Kyle Shanahan, who uses him the way that he is best used. And George Kittle loves to block. And that is his number one skill as a tight end.